Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony. Quick question. You highlighted one difference early in your testimony. The difference between this legislation and the governor's plan was that this had actually measurable and quantifiable goals that would be held to account. Can you list, say, a couple of other quantifiable advantages in this legislation versus the governor's proposal? I was sort of hoping that the CO of NYSERDA would speak more specifically on this bill and didn't. So if you could address what the advantages of this legislation versus the governor's proposals are.
Yeah, well, let me first just acknowledge that I think it's a nice evolution in the executive's stance. For the past 8 years, they did not advance anything like a Climate Action Council before the legislature, nor a piece of legislation that would put climate policy in law. They preferred to do it by administrative fiat, and I think this is an important evolution in their approach. I would have commended them to read a bit more thoroughly the executive order that led to the Climate Action Council. It's a more robust council. So right out of the gates is a more robust council that already exists, but I think the legislation before you involves more stakeholders, a broader segment of not only state agencies, but also brings in the positions of disadvantaged communities. As I said at the beginning, the CCPA was developed from conversations with people in the front line. It wasn't a bill that existed that then we modified. It was developed literally at the grassroots and neighborhood level upwards over time. So then that's a big distinction, is the makeup of the Climate Action Council. Another key piece is the mandate that 40% of clean energy funds, much of which flows from NYSERDA through RGGI and through the Clean Energy Fund itself, would be dedicated to disadvantaged communities right out of the gate. That's designed solely with their input in mind, because one, they represent such a big part of the population, and two, let's face it, disadvantaged communities aren't the ones that are the leading cause of the climate crisis, but they're the ones on the front lines of the impacts. Third, mandatory labor standards. So not done through orders or in solicitations, but actually having labor standards in law is very important. And our labor partners in NY Renews were really committed to helping us write the bill that way and ensuring it's successfully written that way. Third, there's some legal enforcement in the CCPA that's lacking in the governor's bill. I mean, there's a provision in the language that requires all state decision makings to go through several screens. An equity screen to make sure that the decisions are equitable and benefit disadvantaged communities. Climate screens to make sure that we're actually making decisions that advance the goals rather than hinder it. There's a wonderful example just across the road here at Sheridan Avenue. I know you're going to hear about more about that later. But the executive is actually proposing to swap out dirty diesel generators with fossil fuel. Why would we power the building we're in with anything less than renewable energy if we were firmly committed to climate standards in this state? And then last but not least, there's accountability to allow that people would have standing in court to enforce when the state agencies made decisions that weren't aligned with these goals. All these pieces really hang together to ensure that not only do we have goals and standards in law, but they're robust, they're enforceable. You can actually see a pathway towards achieving those goals, so we don't wake up in 2049 and say, oops, we kind of forgot to do some stuff. And that's what leading states are doing. I commend you to talk to the folks in California and what they're doing. They've blazed the trail on this stuff. They know what they're doing. There's a reason why nationally we can copy California standards, and we should be doing it day in and day out here in New York.
Great, thank you.